So we're so happy to have him here today. Thank you, Timothy.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Let me just take a second and tell you what I hope to accomplish with you today in terms of goals and objectives. This session is about applying research and practice in trauma-informed care to an after-school setting. So really understanding what people mean when they start talking about trauma and trauma-informed care and how that relates to our work with youth. I really want to prepare you so that you're able to better support young people who have experienced adverse childhood experiences in their lives. My objectives today, we're going to recognize some specific strategies you can use. This is going to be a very practical workshop. We're going to talk about things to do in after-school programs that support young people. We're going to compare trauma-informed practices to after-school best practices. And we're also going to have some steps that make a program more inclusive and welcoming for children who are experiencing trauma. So that's the goal. I want to begin by talking a little bit about where this comes from, what we're even talking about with trauma-informed practice before we get into some activities and some more interaction. I don't normally like to start a workshop with this much talk. You've heard a lot from Megan and I so far. However, what we've learned in Zoom meetings is it sometimes takes people a few minutes to get connected and get situated. So please, if you have things that you want to ask them in the chat, but we are going to do a little more interactive. We're not going to do this entire workshop lecturing like this. So I just want to give you a heads up about that. So this is basically what we're talking about with trauma-informed practice, but also how I'm using that and where I'm coming from for the rest of the workshop and the sessions we're going to do this morning. So this whole idea of trauma-informed care comes from healthcare. This is based on research that doctors did in solving health problems in adults. So you see on the slide here a list of some of the issues that doctors were seeing in their adult patients that they were having trouble solving. So in each of these cases, whether we're talking about heart disease, smoking cessation, diabetes, doctors had treatments, and treatments were working for some of their patients, but they were finding a significant percentage of patients were initially showing a positive response to treatment, but then going right back to where they were before. So treatments were working for some adults, but not for others with what seemed to be the exact same situation. And doctors were like, that's kind of weird. Like what's going on here? Because we're not talking about a small percentage of the population where like maybe it's, a genetic thing or, maybe there's some other environmental factors. They're like, this is a lot of patients, but we know the treatment works. So why isn't it working with these patients? As they dug deeper, one commonality that they found with these adult patients is many of them had experienced what is called an adverse childhood experience, or ACE. So a few doctors decided to do some research and they said, let's dig into this a little deeper. And they put together a survey. The survey looked like this, and I apologize for the small type, but it essentially asked patients about their childhood. So did they experience psychological abuse in their childhood? Specifically, were they insulted or put down? Were they treated in a way that made you afraid you would be physically hurt? And so this is asking about their treatment by other adults in the household. Then it got into physical abuse. It got into sexual abuse. And this is not only were you yourself abused, did you see someone else in your family receive abuse? So even if you were not the child who was being sexually abused or physically assaulted, if a sibling, if your parent, if someone else, that was also asked in this survey. The survey went on to ask about substance abuse, went to ask about mental illness in the home, if the mother was treated violently, and if there was any criminal behavior in the home, meaning someone got arrested for criminal behavior. So this survey was given to a very large number of adults. Something like 15,000 adults were surveyed. This was a very large cross-section of society when this was initially done. And the results were very interesting. So interesting, in fact, that many in the medical field said, you must have screwed up your research because this can't be true. But this is what they found. Out of all of these people who responded to the survey, only 36% had none of the experiences that I just shared. So that means 64% of the people they surveyed, almost 2/3 of the adult population, has had at least one adverse childhood experience. So experienced sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse in the home. So this is very shocking to a lot of doctors, to people in the medical field. They said that can't be right. That's a lot of people. That's a huge number of people. We would have known about this. We're very smart. We would have known that this was really going on. And what the research showed was, well, it has been going on and we didn't know about it. And what they didn't know was the health impact that an adverse childhood experience can have later in life. That's what this research was really about. So how do these adverse childhood experiences affect a person's life? So what did that research show? Well, so an adverse childhood experience at the very bottom, if that's something a person experiences, it can lead to disrupted neurodevelopment. So now my brain is not learning and growing the way it might before I had that adverse childhood experience. So now my neurodevelopment is disrupted. I can't learn. That could lead to social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, which means now I'm far behind my peers in terms of social development, cognitive development, and emotional development, but it also means I'm having trouble growing in any of those areas. So it's not just that I'm delayed, but I'm actually not able to grow at all. I'm stuck. This can lead to the adoption of health risk behaviors. You saw in my original list of health that I had smoking, I had drug use. So, having trouble in some of these neurodevelopment areas can lead to behaviors that really aren't healthy, which leads to problems. These, of course, can lead to disease, disability, and other social problems. And those, in turn, can lead to early death. Now, having an adverse childhood experience is not a death sentence. It doesn't mean that just because you've had an ACE in your life, that you are automatically on this path. You see that the pyramid gets smaller and smaller as we go. Some people who have had an adverse childhood experience have their neurodevelopment disrupted, and some of those people have further impairments and so on. But this is the path that potentially young people are going on if they're having an adverse childhood experience. So all of those things that I said in the survey. Now, these doctors were really interested in the top of the pyramid, right? They were trying to stop health risk behaviors. They were trying to resolve diseases and disabilities. They were trying to help people heal from these problems. We, for our work, are much more interested in the bottom of the pyramid. We want to interrupt those adverse childhood experiences. We want to stop the abuse where it's happening. We want to get their neurodevelopment back on track so that we can avoid these impairments or get a child back on track in terms of growing and developing, get them resources that they need to resolve these issues. Now, having said that, whoops, I missed a slide. So later, we'll talk a little bit. Part of our role as people, you are probably a mandated reporter in your state. If you know that a child is experiencing physical or sexual abuse, you have to do something about it. You have to call. So we're going to share that information later. This is not a mandated reporter workshop, but these doctors were interviewing adults at decades later in their lives, so they weren't necessarily interested in stopping child sexual abuse. We are. We do want to make sure that we're stopping those abuses, whether they're happening in the home or in their community or wherever. But for our purposes, we want to look at how does this impact the child? What does a child do if they're experiencing these things and their neurodevelopment is disrupted? Well, this research on this slide is from School Day. So as you can imagine, the School Day is really interested in the academic side. So these are some areas where a child who has experienced trauma, meaning they're in a high stress state, these are the things that they have trouble doing. So retrieving information, right? If I tell you something and I ask you to repeat it back for me, that is a very difficult thing for a child who has had significant trauma to do. On the right side is more behavioral. So what are some things that a child who's experienced ACEs or is in the middle of a traumatic experience might do? Well, they might be reactive and impulsive. They might be aggressive or defiant, but they can also withdraw. So now they're not interacting with anybody. They're not engaging with activities. They may also, another way is to become perfectionists. So they seem like they have a lot of skill and they have a lot of strength, but they're never satisfied. Nothing's ever good enough. And they're always down on themselves, trying to be perfect first time, every time. And if they fall short of that unrealistic goal, then everything's horrible. So these are, obviously people are different. So you can't really say just because they're showing one of these behaviors, it means they've had an adverse childhood experience. But these are some of the things that come up. Another area where young people can demonstrate some lag is in their ability to form relationships. So this is relationships with adults, but it's also relationships with peers. So you saw that social impairment was part of that pyramid, and that can be pretty obvious. You see kids who have a really hard time making friends, keeping friends, or forming strong relationships. Now, I told you earlier that 2/3 or so of the adult population reported having ACEs. When I look at this list of behaviors, I'm like, that was basically every child in my after-school program. Like, I have a hard time finding kids who didn't exhibit some of these behaviors or some of these issues at least some of the time. So this is a widespread issue. This is something that happens a lot more than people are recognizing or potentially dealing with. So that was my spiel, just to lay some groundwork about what we are talking about here in terms of trauma-informed care and trauma-informed practice. I'd really love to hear from you in the chat. What are you currently doing at your program that relates to trauma-informed practice? Do you already have some ideas and some things that you have in place that you're doing to help young people deal with some of these issues or get on track when their growth or development isn't where it should be? I'm going to give you a minute. Just anything that you're doing in the chat, we would love to hear about it. And Megan, I cannot see the chat.
Oh, okay. I'd be happy to read it.
If there are any great ideas, resources, or people are just like, nope, nothing, let's move on.
Yeah, Gabriella says, build relationships with all the kids.
Awesome. I would say that's number one, and that's going to be something that we feature later in the session. So thank you, Gabriella. Any other things that people are doing to use trauma-informed approaches or practices in your program? Any questions that you have about anything that I've shared about trauma-informed care or practice? As you come up with things, please share them in the chat. You have to, be speed typer to get your question out. As you think of them, share them in the chat. I'm more than happy to cover this. This is your workshop. So questions, comments, we want to share it. Go ahead, Megan.
Dylan shared, I work with youth in school and out of school to overcome barriers to employment.
Yeah. So I would say a huge part of this is helping young people find positive things to do. And some people think, well, how is that related to trauma? Well, we all need something good in our life, right? So helping young people build skill, helping them get opportunities and take advantage of opportunities, that's a huge lift, right? A lot of those issues that came up at the higher end of the pyramid are when barriers become a problem to the point where they can't finish school, can't get a job, can't do things. So a lot of our programs are actually designed, even to their mission, to help young people overcome obstacles. So I really appreciate that. Thanks. Please keep your comments and questions coming.
Okay.
And
one more here.
Go.
Do you want one more?
Yeah.
Okay, Jake says, working to create a safe space for kids to be able to express how they're feeling and be able to talk about their issues with each other and with the staff.
Yeah.
And then I have another one here from Robin. Allow space for grace. Always give child options for movement to express self physically. Challenges help with mentally hot. That's in quotes, mentally hot.
Yeah. And I really appreciate both of those last two comments, because now you're starting to get to allowing young people to have agency in their life, but also giving them space to express their emotions and express what's going on. So being able to choose and direct their own activity is a huge thing for all young people, but being able to actually address and deal with their emotions and work with them is also a big piece of it. So I'm going to share a couple of assumptions that I've made, and I think you're going to start to see some things align based on what you've been telling me so far. My assumption is that we can create an after-school environment or a program where everyone is accepted and supported regardless of their background or development. So whether a child has experienced ACEs or not, we can create a space where all children feel like they belong and they're supported in their growth and development, no matter where they are, whether their growth has been interrupted or they're on track or they're advanced. So that's one assumption. The next is that strong relationships, which was the very first comment that came up, right? Strong relationships are the key. Being able to build relationships and maintain relationships that are based on trust is a huge part of making that happen. And the last assumption that I'm making is if we're going to do these first two things, we need to be taken care of too. We need support in order to do this work, because many of us are adults who experienced adverse childhood experiences. So we're still coping with the impact of that trauma later in life. And some of us are doing a great job, and some of us are still struggling with it. But we have to be cared for so that we can provide care for other people. So those are my assumptions. We're going to pause my part for a second and give you the spotlight. So we're going to use a feature in Zoom called breakout rooms. What we're going to ask you to do is join a breakout room, and then instead of all of us in the session, there'll just be a few of you, maybe around 5, depending on how many people we have today. So in that small group, we're going to ask you to just introduce yourself. Just tell the other people in your group your name, where you work, what ages you work with, and something you hope to learn this morning. We're going to give you a few minutes to do that. What's going to happen is Megan is going to open the breakout rooms, and a dialog box is going to pop up and ask you to join a room. So you click join. Then you'll be sent into a room where you will be able to see just a few other people. We encourage you at this time, turn on your video if you are comfortable doing that. Turn on your microphone so that you can talk to each other. But this is going to be like sitting at a table together. If we were in an in-person workshop, that's how I think of these breakout rooms. So this is going to be your to connect with each other and to share. And we're going to keep the same breakout room group throughout the session. So when we do some different activities, you'll be working with that same group. So take a minute and get to know each other. Any questions about what I'm asking you to do? All right. As soon as Megan is ready, she's going to start the breakout rooms.
All right, here we go.
Hi, everybody. We're just waiting for the rest of the team to rejoin us. It takes a few seconds for the breakout rooms to actually end. Next time we do a breakout room, you can actually let the timer count down all the way to 0, and it will automatically bring you back into the room. So I encourage people to talk right up until the very last second, just so you can get the most from each other. And Megan, let me know when you think we've got everybody back in the main room.
I think everyone is here.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. This is the first time I've actually gotten a chance to see you. I know you've been looking at me. I'm going to go right back into my slide presentation. But before I do, I just want to check and see, how is the breakout group for everybody? What'd you think of that feature of Zoom? Liked it? You didn't like it? It's good? We get really positive feedback on using breakout rooms. Some people have never used that feature in Zoom. But for me, as I said, it's like having a small group. You're like, you walk into a workshop, you sit down at a table, there's other people at the table. That's what it feels like to me. You just get a chance to talk with a couple of other people. And then we're going to keep these same breakout groups. So you'll get to work a little bit more, get a little bit deeper in your relationship with folks as we go on. So thanks for doing that. And also want to give a shout out to everybody in the room, because not only were you able to go into the breakout groups, you did it without any problems, which has never happened to me before in any of these. So this is clearly a very smart group. So kudos to you. And I'm just trying to get my screen back together, and it's not doing what I want it to do. Okay, there we go. Our first topic to dive deep and can make the connection from trauma-informed practice to actual after-school work and the work with youth is going to be on the topic of self-care, because it's kind of mission critical. So before we jump in and do self-care, I want to take a body break. So we're going to do these a couple of times through the session, because as you may have heard, sitting is not good for you. So if you've been sitting for this entire time, I've been sitting since 1 o'clock to get ready for this. So I'm just going to invite you to stand up and move around a little bit if you can in your space. So I've made sure to clear out my space a little bit just so that I can stand up. And I just want you to just stretch a little bit. You don't have to do anything too strenuous, but just let your blood flow to those areas where maybe it didn't get to go before. I like to stand up on my toes a couple of times just to get circulation back into my calves. So I'm hoping that you're sitting in a position that's comfortable. Doesn't feel too bad to sit for periods of time, but I'm going to make sure that we pause every once in a while just to remember that we have bodies, that we're not just, faces on a screen, just to give us a chance to remember that we need to take care of ourselves, even if we're in long meetings. It's not just long Zoom meetings. If you're in long meetings in person, it's good to say, hey, can we take 5? Can we go and refresh our bed, or can we make this a walking meeting and just, move around a little bit? Because that's really good and really healthy for you. So I just wanted to model that. We do that in our staff meetings, or if we're doing any other kind of meeting that requires us to sit on a screen for a long time, we build in these breaks just to remember that we're not robots. We can't sit constantly and expect to function at a high level. So I've got 3 areas of self-care that I want to explore with you all. We could address a lot of other areas, but for our purpose today, I wanted to keep it simple: physical, mental, and social. So what I want to get you to do, and you'll do this again in breakout rooms, we have a Google Doc in a shared drive. The PowerPoint, all of the resources that I'm going to share with you are already saved in that Google folder. But there's a document in there called self-care. What I'm going to invite you to do is to open that document and enter some things that you currently do to take care of yourself. And here in New York, we have been in lockdown basically since March because of the, maybe you've heard of it, COVID-19 pandemic sweeping the nation. So we've been locked down since then. Our state began to open up a little bit in July, but we're still very much isolated from each other. Our office has not reopened and won't reopen for the rest of this year. So people have had to make a lot of adjustments, but they're doing it. So what have you done to take care of yourself physically, mentally, and socially? But what are some things that you wish you were doing more of? Maybe there are things you used to do before that are a struggle to do now, or it might just be a wish list, right? Like, I would love to lose weight and be in better shape, so I'm like, oh, I should go to the gym more, I should run more. So we want both and things that you currently do, but also some things that maybe you could do more or wish you could add to your self-care routine. Now, not everybody's going to have access to this Google Doc because of how you're joining.
It says access was denied.
Okay, so what you need to do, Megan, is go in and choose the share and make sure that anyone can edit.
Okay.
I have had this exact same problem using Google Docs. So thank you to those who were able to click on that link and discover this. Very good. We need you. We need your detective skills to check on us and make sure that all of these other things work.
All right, let's see.
But once we're all able to access the document and add to it, we're going to ask you to do that. Now, one of the features in breakout rooms, and I'm going to stop sharing so I can see people. One of the features in breakout rooms, you can actually share your screen. So if only a couple of you can directly access the Google Doc, one of you can share your screen and show that doc and scribe for people. So you can have one person type while other people add their ideas, or you can just open the document directly and start adding your ideas. I've got a section for physical, a section for mental, and a section for social. So make sure you add to both columns things that you currently do, things that work for you, and things that you want to try or wish you did more. Because we really want to hear your insights. We want to hear what you do.
Okay, wonderful. And this is a yellow and orange document, right? With the
Correct.
physical. Okay, so you want people to add to what's already there.
Yeah. There is some stuff already in there. So you can put a check next to it, or whatever, put a star, like, oh yeah, I do that. But we want to hear your ideas. We want you to add your 2 cents to the document as well. All right.
It looks like it's working because I see some anonymous animals: a beaver, a buffalo,
Yes.
manatee, and an alligator.
Why don't I see them? Like, how come they're not showing up on my video? Like, I would have noticed if there was a buffalo here. Anyway,
it's anonymous.
We're going to go ahead and do this in breakout groups so you can tell each other about what you're seeing. That's why they're anonymous buffalo. Think of that. That way you can have a conversation about it, what you're seeing, what you're doing. And if anybody in your group is unable to access the document, we just ask that you add their 2 cents on their behalf in that document. That's why we shared it like this. Okay. Mm-hmm. And all of these instructions are also, there's a document in that same folder that is breakout room instructions. So if you're like, what are we supposed to be doing? What did he ask us to do? There's actually a document with all the instructions for all these breakout rooms in there too.
Mm-hmm. Now, do we want to share the document, do a screen share so people can see?
Afterwards.
Oh, gotcha.
I want everybody to have another chance to connect with their breakout room. And then when that's done, we'll share the finished document so we can look at it together. All right, so we'll go ahead and do breakout rooms again. And we're going to give you 8 minutes to work. So 8 minutes to brainstorm. Try to hit all 3 areas. I know some of you have already started. Just keep going. And then again, when the room closes, you can wait until the very last second before you come on back. It will bring you back to the main room automatically. All right. So once those breakout groups start, go ahead and join the breakout rooms, keep working on the document, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back, everybody. I'm going to share my screen again. I see people still typing. Please keep typing. You're going to have access to this document afterwards. And I think one of the great things about this is having a list of things that you know are good for you that you can reference can really actually help you follow through on your own self-care. So I'm just scanning it really fast just to see. I know there was already some stuff in here, but I really love that people included a very broad range of things and that you included nutrition as well, that people were thinking about eating as a big part of that physical thing. And a lot of these things, like there's a range, like physical challenges, ropes courses, can be anything from people with disabilities to, almost Olympic level athletes can all find a level of challenge there. Those are awesome things to do. But just having a normal schedule, just having some routines that involve physical activity makes a huge difference. Under mental, I see, I'm going to tell you the things that I started that I thought were awesome. Board games, I love board games. I did some social distancing with some friends this weekend. We played cards and board games. It was lovely. So very great mental type activity to do. Music is a huge thing. It's wonderful to have music, whether to keep you going or to unwind. And sometimes people have emotional connections to music, so it helps them either feel like they're not alone, right? So sometimes you want to listen to music that's sad because you want to feel like you're like other people have experienced this too. And other times you're like, I need to change this. I need some energy. And music can be a great way to do that. So awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Cooking to de-stress. Yes. And lots of hobbies, especially hobbies that are hands-on, where you're moving your hands and you're engaged in a process, can be very therapeutic. So thanks for sharing that. Journaling, I think, is a brilliant idea. And these are all relatively inexpensive things to do, right? Uh, just get some paper and just start writing. Under social, walking the dogs, walking with family, just taking a walk. And when you're out on a walk, suddenly you're engaging with other people, right? People in your neighborhood, people who are also using those trails, great. Talking more with neighbors, just checking in with your neighbors. I have a very social neighborhood. So all I have to do is walk outside, and there's usually 2 or 3 neighbors within a few houses that are just willing to shoot the breeze and say, hey, what's going on? So that's a real, like, very simple things, right? But it makes a huge difference in our mental life. What was it like for you all to do this? To think about all the ways that you care for yourself. What was that like? Was it difficult? Was it easy? Was it fun?
We were commenting on how many like similarities there were.
Yeah. It's kind of surprising, right? It's like, wait, you too? You do that too? Oh. I see. Go ahead. Somebody else was going to say something.
I also appreciated the reminders. Robin mentioned breathing, when things get stressful, and remember to breathe. And it's just such a great reminder of, we're all human beings, and we need to have that space and allow ourselves that space.
Yeah. Was that Rudy?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Rudy.
And then Heather, do you want to unmute real quick and share what you had here? Or Jake? I can read it off too if you want.
Oh, I just said I thought it was difficult because at first I thought that I wasn't doing anything at all, which I was happy to be doing nothing. So I guess that is something. And then, but then like everyone else, I saw lots of things that are similar to what I was doing that actually were helpful.
Awesome. And Jake, it says here that it was eye-opening, that you're not doing as much as you should be. So if you want to add anything to that, we would love to hear it.
Yeah, so I just looking at the list and seeing what a lot of other people were doing. I probably, especially at the beginning of quarantine, wasn't doing as much as I should have been to take care of my mental health. And I've started increasing some of my activities. And luckily we've been able to, like, about a month or so ago, I was actually able to like go see my friends for the first time, which was really nice. But like, I've been able to kind of come out of it just a little bit, but I think it was just really hard. It's that mental thought. We kind of, we talked about it in our group of like, even going for a walk, it was kind of that mental, like, no, you can't go outside. You're never allowed to go outside again. Like, that kind of mental barrier that was kind of placed up there.
Absolutely. And I would have talked about self-care in this section, because this is an issue for people who work in mission-oriented organizations and nonprofits. We have a high tendency for burnout because we don't take care of ourselves. We're always trying to help other people. We can always find reasons to do more for others, and we don't make time for ourselves. And this pandemic has really emphasized that and really underscored how hard it is to do self-care, in my opinion. And I encourage you to be positive about it. If you find things that you aren't doing, say to yourself, oh, maybe I could start doing that right now. It's really easy to add to the negativity by saying, oh, in addition to all the other problems, now I'm not exercising enough. Now I'm not doing this enough. Well, great, one more thing. And that's not really helpful. But recognize too, this is not you being lazy or being a procrastinator. We're in a pandemic. Everything changed suddenly, new restrictions all of a sudden across the board. People are still adjusting. So for me, I have found that I get really tired by Wednesday. And I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, oh, I must not be doing something right. No, it's like our work has changed. The stress levels are through the roof. I don't have the same level of energy because I don't know how to maintain it under all these new restrictions. So just notice those things. I think that's the power of journaling. It's definitely the power of being with your colleagues and talking through these things. But just recognize, like, there's some really good reasons why we're tired, why we're stressed, why these things are going on. Final question for you. Anything on that list that could be good to do with young people? Did you see anything on that list that could help you in your programming or in your work with youth? It's something to think about. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the session. But think about, what are some things I can take from self-care for me that might actually help my young people learn how to self-care? Because that's one of those skills, right? Like learning how to manage your own emotions, manage your own time, manage your own body. That's a skill that we had to learn. Some of us learned it the hard way, and some of us were good at it from the get-go. So let me come back to my amazing PowerPoint presentation so that we can move on. Does everybody see the slide breakout rooms? Yes? Thank you, Megan, for nodding. We already covered all of this on these slides, so I'm just going to skip through them because you have a brilliant list. Again, I encourage you to download that list and keep a copy for yourself. It's a great thing to print out. And if you feel stuck, if you feel de-energized, demotivated, take a quick scan of the list and you might be like, oh, I think it's time to take a walk. I think it's time to check in with my friends. I think it's time to do some yoga. That way you're taking the decision-making out of it, which is usually the first thing that you lose when you're stressed, tired, anxious. You lose the ability to make good decisions. So having a list that you can go to and be like, is there anything here I can do? That might be a good help for you. I'm looking at a slide now that says self-care, and I'm wondering if anybody can explain what is going on in this slide. Like, what is this even about? Can somebody talk me through this?
It's
You have to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. Put your air mask on first.
Yeah, thank you. So this is from airline safety, right? This is something that they go over with you. You must secure your own oxygen mask before you help anybody else. And you went right to the metaphor, right? We have to take care of ourselves if we are going to be able to function and do any of the work that we try to do for young people. I just like this image because we want to help other people so badly. We would do so even though we're not getting oxygen. We would be so helpful to the point where we're on the brink of death. And that's not a good place to be. So we need to make sure that we're doing what we need to do for us, for ourselves, so that we can be there for others and be there fully for others without stress, without anxiety, and really able to be there for them. So thank you for explaining that to me. But I think it's a good visual, a good thing for all of us to remember.
Timothy, there's something different with the way you're sharing your slides. It's like splitting them into two screens and showing the notes.
Yes, this is the presenter view. So this looks like behind the scenes. So
yeah.
If you would love to be professional development directors someday, this is what it looks like behind the curtain.
Okay.
So I'll try to fix that in a minute. But what you're seeing is the slide that I'm looking at on the left, and on the right is the next slide coming up. So we're going to talk about relationships and what that looks like and how to do it well, but we're going to take a break first. So this is another body break, and this is a break that I call a leave the screen break. So I'm going to start a timer. I'm going to share my screen again, but this time I'm going to share a timer that I opened earlier and is somewhere hiding on my screen now that I can't find. There it is. So you should see a timer. It says 5 minutes. I'm going to start this timer, but I want you to take 5 minutes and get away from your screen. Just go do whatever. You can run to the restroom. You can refresh your beverage. You can take the dog out, check on your family, whatever you need to do. Go ahead and start right now. When this timer gets down to 0, we'll be back ready to go. But I'll see you in 5 minutes. I mentioned before we went into the break that we were going to start talking about relationships. So let me come on back to this amazing presentation. We actually have some standards that we can reference. So when we talk about relationships, relationships are complicated. And I mentioned earlier, I want this to be a practical workshop. So there are details that we can give you to help make sense of what a good relationship works like. And this is really important, especially for new staff, to be able to communicate this, because it's one thing for me to say to experienced people, strong relationships are important. But for a brand new staff, like somebody who's 18, who just started working in the program, they're like, what? What does that mean? Like, what do you want me to do? You want me to like bond with them? Like, you want me to take them out? Like, what are we talking about? So putting a finer point on it is what we want to do right now. Now, New York State actually has a set of standards. Valerie and I were actually talking about this a little bit earlier, related to quality self-assessment that are recognized across our state. In Colorado, we've got a couple of documents that we want to reference now in case you want to go deeper. And then, as Megan mentioned, there are also examples from other states. So we're going to focus on one particular area, but if you're interested in learning more, there are resources specific to after school that can really help you do this. And the main takeaway from all of this is that the research shows that high quality after school programs make a big difference in the lives of young people. So you might know that from doing it, from your own experience, but that research has led to the development of a lot of these tools, and it really gives some great guidance in terms of how you maintain and improve what's working in your program. So, Megan, you're going to add something?
Yeah, I was going to ask if people could just take a minute to type into the chat if your program currently uses, follows a program improvement tool or follows standards for care. I was wondering what people were using because, Colorado doesn't really have a unifying set of standards for after school and out of school care. And so just curious what people were looking at or using, or are they using these, or are there other ones that people are drawing on?
Yeah, so please share that in the chat if you're using different, and they might be specific to your organization or specific to your program. It might be something that somebody's developed internally, but we would love to know about that. From the 21st century observational instruments, so this is used in Colorado's 21st century community learning centers, the federally funded programs. Some things that they have for staff to do related to building strong relationships, attentively listening to and observing youth. So it really comes down to being that specific and that simple. Pay attention to young people and listen to them when they talk. And that seems very basic, but the next time you're out in public and you see children, look and notice how other adults treat those children. What I've noticed is adults tend to ignore kids or look at them with very cross expressions on their faces. They're like, "What? Who's watching these kids?" So having people actually give them positive attention and actually listen to what they say is a big deal for young people. Some other things on here, giving them a chance to actually share their ideas and opinions and concerns, actually being open to what they have to say and what they have to share with you. That's a big deal. But all of this goes to create a relationship. If I'm a person who stops and listens and honors what somebody says to me, then they're much more likely to trust me and to like me, and now we can work together, right? Now they want to be in the program with me, and a lot of other good things will happen. That's what we're talking about when we talk about relationships. The DAA pillars really focus on social, emotional, and academic learning. So this is another take on this, another way to think about it. And it's really about creating and cultivating social, emotional skills. So relationships is a part of it, but it's not the only thing. What I like about these standards is it puts a different spin on things. So self-awareness is a piece of this. Self-management is another piece, but so is social awareness. So being able to think of yourself and how you interact in a social setting, these are all skills that we learn. Now, healthy young people learn as they grow. People have talked about how 2-year-olds, for example, are just sponges, and they seem to absorb vocabulary and interaction. But when your neurodevelopment is disrupted, then some of these things can be blocked, right? Now you're not paying attention to how people talk and how they interact. You're paying attention to, is anything scary about to hurt me? So that's part of what happens with trauma-informed practice, is realizing that not everybody's had the exact same experiences, so we might have to help them develop some of these skills. I don't want to spend a ton of time on each individual tool. I will mention our New York State practices, the quality self-assessment, which is free, by the way. You can download it from our website, has similar guidance, but these specifics are important. There's very concrete things you can do to build strong relationships. Calling young people by their name, getting to know their names is a big deal and something that should be emphasized with new staff. What I want to do with you all right now is give you an activity that I think gives you a chance to practice this and hopefully will help you to form relationships on an even deeper level. When I say relationships, by the way, I am not only talking about you in your program. I'm also talking about all the other staff, and I'm talking about the supervisors, and I'm talking about anybody in training, like any teens who might be starting out in the program and are going to become program staff. And I'm talking about volunteers, people who might be coming in as special guest speakers, people who might be part of the school building but support your work. All of these people should be working to form strong relationships. Anybody who touches children in a metaphorical way, anybody who has contact with young people, I should say it that way, really, we want them to be thinking about forming strong, trusting relationships with youth, right? I don't want people wandering through who hate young people, because that's going to be super obvious. Like, everybody needs to be on board with this. Why? Research shows that the more adults who can form strong connections with a young person, the higher the chances of that young person's success. And that's success in school, that's success in life, in social skills, in family, it's success in career. The more adults that are in that young person's corner, the more likely they are to achieve. So that's what we're shooting for here. What I want to ask you all to do is practice a specific that I think would be really helpful. So in your breakout rooms, you're going to go around and take turns. One person is going to talk about yesterday. So you're just going to talk about your Monday. You're going to talk about what happened during the course of your Monday. Just give us the highlights in 1 minute. The other people in your group are going to listen to how you were feeling. So when that minute is up, the other people in your group are going to try to identify how you felt, what emotions you had during the course of your day. So they might say something like, you felt frustrated, or they might ask a question to clarify, were you angry when that happened? So you're not just listening to what the person is saying, you're not just listening to the content of their day, you're trying to listen to, how did they feel? What emotions were they going through possibly? And you don't have to pinpoint. I'm not, looking for, we're going to keep score in terms of accuracy, but I want you to try to listen and try to gauge what emotions might this person be feeling during the course of their day. We're going to give you some time so that each person in your breakout will get a chance to share their day. And then you just want to share what emotions you thought they were having. The person can say, yes, that's correct, or, oh, actually it was more like this. But then you're going to move on to the next person. So I want to make sure everybody gets a chance both to share about their yesterday in 1 minute, but that you're also all getting the chance to try to listen for emotions. Okay? Questions about what I'm asking you to do? We're going to go to breakouts. You are going to listen for emotions. You're going to take turns. You're just one person at a time talking about your yesterday, what happened yesterday. And we're going to give you 10 minutes to do this so that you've got a good length of time to actually think about what happened yesterday, because it might feel like a week ago. And but also to give you a few minutes to talk about it, about what that experience was like. Okay?
Here we go.
All right. We'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back, everybody. I mentioned our quality self-assessment standards, so I just posted a link in the chat if you're interested in what we do. Obviously, it's New York. Some people are like, oh, New York, they have some interesting thing going on. They're like, New York, we know what we're doing. We don't need New York telling us what to do. So whatever, you can check it out or not. I also want to acknowledge that Angela mentioned before we started the breakout group, positive youth development. Basically, everything I was saying before is all about positive youth development. That approach, that philosophy, the research that has gone into what makes great youth programs, PYD is where it's at. So if you're not familiar with positive youth development, in our state, Cooperative Extension owns and promotes that, and they're really sharing that method. But positive youth development has lots of great resources and tips and tricks. So thank you for mentioning that, Angela. What was it like in your breakouts to listen to each other's feelings? How'd that go? Interesting. Yeah, go ahead, Will.
I think it really taught me that it's so good to listen to other people, because it just feels good to get it out and then someone else listening to you. Sometimes I feel like I can be about myself and forget about listening to what the other person's saying. And so I feel like that was what I really pulled from it, is that it really hit home. It was nice to talk about my day, even though maybe it wasn't the best day, but it just felt good that I got it out and someone listened to me.
Yeah, thank you. Angela, I noticed that you had unmuted yourself. Did you want to add something?
It's nice to practice both as the listener or the receiver, the listening for the emotion. So you're really like connecting with people, kind of understanding where they are coming from, and even as a listener would have the opportunity to say, and so were you feeling this way? And just that deeper level of communication.
Yeah. Other thoughts or observations about what that was like?
I also thought it was real cool that, we all have our strengths, right? We all have strengths and weaknesses. However, I think sharing our day and hearing what other people thought of it and them coming in with their strength, and I'll just use this as an example. Robin, she has a great skill of looking at both sides of the coin. And in looking at that, it really kind of helped me see how, there's one side of it, but you got to look at the other side too, So thank you, Robin and Will. That was just awesome.
Awesome. And I really appreciate what you're saying, because this is why I thought this was a good activity. And to me, it's important to have an experience so that we can actually realize, because so much information gets transmitted when you have an experience. So it feels good to be listened to. And it also can go deeper, because now you can use these skills of questioning, right? But it also creates an opportunity. And that's what you were just talking about, Rudy. If I'm sharing something, it's an opportunity for other people to explore it and to offer new perspectives. And it's like, whoa, like I was just talking about my day, but now I learned something and I feel closer to you. Like, what kind of magic is this? That's insane. Like, whoa. But that's youth work, right? Like when we're doing our job really well, all we're doing is paying attention and honoring what you're bringing to the table. But a lot of really great stuff happens because it feels good to be connected. And honestly, if we're talking about kids who are coming from abusive situations, they need people that they can turn to and talk to. And it helps if they can trust them and those people are consistent. So this was sort of a microcosm of what I hope will happen on a regular basis in programs. So some things to think about. Do we create these opportunities for this to happen in our program every day? So some programs do like a group check-in where everybody gets a turn going around a circle. Others might do that like in small groups, like, during attendance at a table, like you might only have 10 kids. That's a chance to do this kind of like what's going on. And you have to put some limits on it, right? Like a minute, 2 minutes. But some groups, when they get good at this, will give somebody say like, hey, it sounds like Will really needs to talk about yesterday. Let's give him our time, And then like when somebody's really having a day, you can give them what they need when somebody else is like, I'm good. Like, let's focus on Will right now. Okay, great. but that you get that sense of community and you can make those decisions as a group. It's not me saying, I think we need to give this person all the time. It's the kids saying, I want to be here for my friend and I want to do that. And that's a skill too, right? That's an awareness level. So it's not that hard, right? This is just being friendly, being connected, being compassionate, being respectful. But for a lot of people that work with youth, they don't know how to do this. So I wanted to share this with you. I think it's a great technique. It encourages us to listen deeply. But I also hope that if you've got staff who aren't doing this, I think this is a great technique to do at staff meetings, right? We need to be heard and listened to as well. So giving ourselves a chance to process what happened during the day that just happened or whatever, like that's a big thing too. I want to shift into the third part and talk a little bit about program environment, talk about the bigger picture. So even though you may or may not be doing physical environment right now with your young people, I want to do an activity that I think is relative even if you're engaging virtually. But before we do that, we're going to take another body break. This is actually going to be a dance break. So Megan has queued up some music for us. So I'm going to move my chair. I've already cleared my space. I know I'm safe, but make sure before you start dancing, make sure that your environment is free from hazards. There's nothing you can trip on. I'm next to a ceiling fan. I want to make sure that I'm not going to smack into it. So I'm good. I've got my dance space. But Megan's going to play some music. We're just going to 60 seconds and just move. Here we go. Okay.
That is Yaz, everybody.
That was awesome.
From
Yeah,
the 80s.
song Situation from the album Upstairs at Eric's.
Uh-huh.
Fine purveyors of vinyl records. Again, we just need to pause every once in a while just to remember with your body. We can't sit for too long. Music breaks, singing breaks, exercise breaks, great ways to break up what you do. Strongly encourage this for staff meetings. Honestly, just remember to have fun. Woo! I obviously need to exercise more. Going back to the point that was made earlier, a little more self-care. When I talk about program environment, I'm basically talking about these elements: rules, routines, the activities, but I'm also talking about the tone, right? How it feels to be in an environment and the imagery in the environment. This is going back to positive youth development, but really having youth voice and youth choice in framing the environment, shaping the rules, the boundaries, creating the images, that's critical. The other thing I look for in activities, are they hands-on? Am I touching stuff? Am I able to engage it directly? But is it also engaging my brain, right? Am I engaging critical thinking, and that kind of stuff? Consistent structure is important, but so is the ability for children to see themselves and see people different from themselves. So a young person should see themselves in the environment. They should see images of people like them, but it's also a chance to expose them to people who are different, who have different experiences. Ultimately, the environment, as soon as a young person walks in, they should feel like this place is for them. There should be lots of messages in the kinds of materials, the size of the furniture, all that kind of stuff. But we are part of the environment. So how we approach them, how we talk to them, what it sounds like in the environment is also a key piece of this. Going back to the last activity, listening to young people and taking them seriously when they have something to share is a part of the tone of the environment. what I want to do with you right now, we're going to do this as a group. So we're going to do this together. So Megan, can you paste these into the chat so I can stop sharing? So I want you to think about a message that you would want your young people to hear or to receive. So something you want them to know, something you want them to remember, something you want them to think about, okay? So think about a message that you would want your young people to get from you. As you're thinking about the message, I want you to think about how will you transmit it? How am I going to send this message to my young people? Am I going to make a sign that I hang in our program? Am I going to send them a text? Am I going to sing a song? Am I going to write music? Am I going to do a rap? Am I going to send them a TikTok, a Vine? You know, am I going to post this on Instagram? Like, how am I going to get my message to my young people? So craft a message, and then how am I going to send it? I'm going to give you 1 minute to think about that. A message you want to send and how you might send it. So take a minute to just process that. I'll start a timer. When you are ready, you can put your message in the chat, but don't send it yet. We'll send it all at the same time. So if you've got some ideas, you can put them in the chat, but don't hit enter. Just keep it ready to go. We still have 30 seconds to think. And if you're ready, go ahead and hit enter. Let us see what your message might be and how you might send it. So some things you want your young people to know and how you might transmit that message.
You want me to read them off? Timothy, it gets better. A poster with pictures of our heroes. Valerie says, you are special because. Danette says, to be fearlessly authentic, I would spread my message through many modalities because that is how you remember things. TikTok, posters in the space, other social media, emails in the program.
Oh, keep thinking about what's a message you want to send to your kids. And this can be anything, right? This could be, I need to remember that we keep our hands to ourselves when we walk in the hallways. These are much larger sort of like inspirational messages that we're all on board with right now, in my opinion. Be yourself. Thank you, Gabriella. So how are you going to send and promote this message? So Danette is like, you got to do it all the ways, right? How would we do that? So if we agree that one of these messages was going to be sent, how would I get that message sent? What would I do? Like we're a youth program. We've agreed on the message. Now what's our next step to do?
Mary says, you are important, valued, and loved. Give an example written so they can keep it.
Sorry.
Will says.
Yeah, something they can walk away with. Go ahead.
Will says, I would want them to hear this quote, don't chase, don't beg, don't stress, just relax. It will come to you. Make your wants want you.
Nice.
Rudy says, are you ready to enter the workforce? Come to one of our local workforce centers and talk to one of your career counselors. Smile. This is a place for you. Dylan says, communicating effectively with your peers and adults is so important to be self-sufficient in the future. The method for sharing would be showing different clips from the show The Office to highlight why. Angela says, To let them know I care about them and am here for them always. I will tell them in person and at meetings and through texts. Jake says, wash your hands. I'll act it out for my kids using a soap as a superhero versus the villain of dirt and illness. Yes.
I really appreciate not only the difference in messages, because they're very different levels, right? But also all the different ways that we can transmit information. So if we were a staff and these were the messages, who would be responsible for sending it? Is this something that I'd have to take on? Is this something that each person would do independently? Is this something we would do as a group? How would we get these messages out? I see Robin is doing an activity. The kids are entering the gym silently and they're coming together and talking about the differences. They're adding messages about uniqueness. So teamwork makes the dream work. Yes, Danette. So
which came from The Office, by the way.
It's true.
Yeah.
Even outside The Office. The Office gets a lot wrong, but that they got right.
Yeah.
So this potentially becomes a bigger project, right? Like we have some messages. Some of these are rules that we have to follow. Some of these are inspirational things. They're kind of lifelong things that I want to have with me when things get tough, right? Things to keep me going, keep me centered. So they're important. We would create these. We would do these different things. Would I do them with or without youth? Are these things I would do before youth even come into my program? Are these things I would get youth to do with me? Or would I turn around and get my young people to do these and take their messages? Or is it all the above? Maybe some things I create for them and put out in the environment, and then some things we do together, and then later, yeah, all of the above. Later, it's now to like, you're going to come up with messages and I'm going to help you, support you in crafting it. So the important thing here is we have information we need to send, right? I need kids to remember to wash their hands. I want them to stay positive and not get stressed and overwhelmed because I know that they can do this even if they don't know it themselves, right? So these are important messages for them to get at the right time. I can transmit it in lots of ways, but creating a message and transmitting it is a skill. So if I can get my young people engaged in this process, not only are we doing a fun and interesting activity that helps us and supports us, but now I'm teaching them a skill, right? Danette brought up like all these modalities earlier, and I'm like, I want to do the activity with TikTok. I don't even know what that is. Like, I'm still recovering from the fact that nobody uses MySpace anymore. Like, I need to get on board with this new social media. So I could be learning something really great from this process, right? Maybe I've made posters, but I've never made posters the way you make them. So there can be some skill and some connection in doing and creating and crafting. The idea of doing a skit, doing some role playing as part of this, that's really cool. Like making it into a thing about heroes and villains. Like this could become acting out, it could become comic books, it could become comic strips on our wall. Like there's all kinds of places that can go, and that's great. Because if you start doing this, now you're doing language arts, now you're doing community building, you're doing fun activities, you're building skills. Like all of a sudden, a lot of really good things are coming from this, all from trying to transmit a message. So this is good youth work, right? This is hands-on and minds-on. And we're in part of the process, and so are our young people. Do you agree? Does that make sense? What are your thoughts about this whole thing? Thumbs up from Angela. Thank you, Angela. I just wanted some acknowledgement and recognition, and I got it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Will. So, I mean, I appreciate that, like, for some of you, this is not news, right? You're like, oh, we kind of already do that. Like, that's a lot of what we do, right? We're doing things for the kids, with the kids. Like, we do this on a regular basis. That's the point. A lot of what you are already doing is supporting and encouraging young people who may have experienced trauma in their lives, are going through a lot of stuff right now. and it's positive for them. So continue doing that. These kinds of things, these very simple things, like how do I let you know I care about you? How do I send that message? If I can do it with my kids, I'm also showing them how they can do it for each other, how they can do it for people they care about. If I can get them involved in crafting messages, I'm also saying what you have to say is important and other people want to hear it, which is a message a lot of young people don't get, right? They're told you should be seen and not heard. Nobody's going to believe you. Don't ever tell this to anybody. Keep it a secret. So these are all ways we can counter these messages through doing activities that also have all these other benefits. That's good youth work. I want to recognize that we are close to the end of time. So I'm going to come back to my amazing PowerPoint presentation. Can you see activities? Can you see the slide that says we don't work alone? Before we wrap up, I want to point out there's a lot that is potentially missing from really supporting young people who have experienced adverse trauma experiences. There's a lot of value in partnering with schools and what they bring to the table. Parents and families have a lot of resources, healthcare providers, mental health care providers. There's probably other community-based organizations in your area that want to help address these issues, whether we're talking about abuse and neglect, we're talking about substance abuse, we're talking about high crime, lack of resources. If we are working together, we can actually make a dent in a lot of these societal issues. Our lane is creating a great experience for young people, but that young person may need a lot of other people in their corner too. So this is a great way to connect with those other professions and build on it. But what I hope you got from today is that we already have a lot in place about what we know works for young people, and that's our lane, is creating a great, safe environment where they feel welcome, not only welcome, but celebrated, and that they have an active part in making that a great program. But there's a lot of good stuff that comes from that, right? Positive youth development. So we talked about a lot. We talked about what this whole idea of trauma-informed care and adverse childhood experiences are. We covered the idea of self-care, strong relationships. We glanced at what programming might look like to start addressing some of these needs and getting them involved in positive activities. And I want to give you a second to kind of process all of that. So there's a document in our shared drive called Reflective Planning Sheet. It just asks you a couple of questions. It's really just to give you a chance to capture what you're thinking about, what you've learned, and any questions you might have. This is not the evaluation. This is for you, by you and for you. It's a chance for you to capture in writing what the value in today's session was. You might have reinforced things you already knew, right? Stuff that you were already going to do, but now you're like, I'm 100% rock solid on that. That is good stuff for me to be doing. You might have heard some great ideas from your peers. I don't want you to lose that. So take 2 minutes. You can use that form and download it and write it out. You can also just open a Word document for yourself or a scrap of paper that you have nearby. But just take 2 minutes and just try to capture what you are taking away from today's session. When that time is up, we will close. So 2 minutes.
I think it would be better if people downloaded it versus doing it on the Google Drive, because what's happening is, people are overwriting each other.
Yeah, if you take it and download it and keep it for yourself, that's a better practice, because this is for you to take away afterwards. This is your chance to capture, so that tomorrow, next week, when you pick it up, you'll be like, what is this thing? Like, oh yeah, that workshop. So if you download it and keep it for yourself, then you can save it where you can get at it or print it for later. Thank you. 1 more minute. Again, you don't need to use that document. You can just write it down on a scrap of paper, whatever works for you. If you're still writing, please continue. I think the act of writing and reflecting is essential to learning. And I want to make sure that you're walking away with something that you can use. So please keep doing that. I want to make sure if there are any questions that people have, anything that you wanted to hear more about or that we can go into, that you let me know those in the chat. So just take a second if you have questions or comments. I am going to share the evaluation. We have a online evaluation form, so we'll put that link in the chat. But I just want to, in the minute that we have left, just see if anybody else has anything else they want to share or ask. The evaluation link is in the chat, so if you want to click on that, you can. In that shared drive, that Google Drive that you were able to access all these documents, there's a copy of the PowerPoint. All of the links are live in that PDF, so you can find all of the resources that were shared earlier. The PowerPoint also has some links and resources at the end that we didn't get to look at. So there's also some documents in that drive, other resources that we didn't necessarily get to touch on. So I encourage you to give yourself a few minutes to just poke around and see if there's anything else of value in there. Danette does not have access to the eval. And I thought that it was all totally accessible. So let me go in and take a look at it too.
Timothy, I'll also follow up with an email with all of the links that were shared today. Yeah.
Try this link. I just copied a new link to the form. Thank you, Robin. I mean, we could have gone into depth on any one of those points. And I think the important thing was, let's do some experiences to really drive them home and give you resources to go deeper in those areas where you felt you needed to. So I hope that helped. I hope that was a good design. Thank you, Mary, for the feedback. Does research tell us if there's an age when adverse childhood experiences do not affect them as adults? I'm glad you asked this question because I actually went to grad school and we covered this. So let me put on my graduate school hat. The answer is no. So Harvard Business Review actually just did an article this week about trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder, which is different than what we were talking about today. But essentially, trauma at any age can affect you. The other thing is trauma can be passed generationally. So if I have a horribly traumatic experience and I carry it with me, it can change my DNA. I can transmit it socially to my descendants, and I can transmit it via DNA. So it really has horrible impacts on us at all ages. What this research was able to see is that if we don't address it, adverse experiences in a childhood that we think we survived are still impacting us much later in life. So trauma and traumatic experiences have very horrible effects on us at all ages. Great question. I will say, again, it's not universal, right? One person's traumatic experience is another person's no big deal. So it's very personal, and it's not a death sentence. A lot of these things people can recover from. It's just we need different measures of recovery, different measures of support to recover from it. If you're able to open and complete the evaluation, And we are over time. I don't want to take any more of your valuable time. I want to thank you for being here today. And I want to thank you for all of the work you do for the children and youth of Colorado. It was wonderful to meet you and to be with you today. So as long as you're able to do that evaluation, we're all set. Thank you. I'm going to hang out for a few more minutes in case people want to talk. But you can go ahead and leave meeting if you want to. And I hope to see you again at some point in the future. Take care.